in your hands. So when they get things fixed and repaired, you can say, hey, look, this is what I had. You have it. I want it back. Is your personal data safe? Family records, addresses, phone numbers? Well, squeeze on over to freedomslips.com. Yes, that's www.freedomslips.com. Click the banner on the homepage for the EMP-proof bullet drive to get the full scoop of everything that we offer. So, folks, keep your data safe for your peace of mind. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all!
See how the trouble you've started?
Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it.
Right, you tell them I'm coming, and hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio!
Hello, Hart. I'm going to do a quick podcast now. I don't know.
Extendivite really works. Just listen to what some people have to say.
Several years ago, I was developing a very severe situation. I called it my flippy heart. It just was doing not good things, and I did not want to go to a medical doctor because I just knew they would give me a cover-up pill. I didn't want to get onto that sort of thing at all. When I learned it was garlic and cayenne, and cayenne is a healer. It is a wonderful herb. I said, I think I'm onto something here. I'll tell you, I wouldn't be without it. It did wonderful things for me.
Extendivite is only $69.95 for a 2-month supply of either capsules or liquid. Call now. That's 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendivite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Could it be that? I don't know. I believe.
So, hopefully I'm on air. Very excited to interview her. And I'm going to try and bring her on air. I'm just going to read out who she is. Somebody put, she just wanted to get quite exciting. Okay, it's Mary Rodwell, founder and principal of the Australian Closeting Cancer Research Network, co-founder and director of Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research into ET Encounters. She's a former nurse, hypnotherapist, and Reiki Master International speaker, research, and author of Awakening: How Extraterrestrial Contact Can Transform Your Life. The New Human: Awakening to Our Cosmic Heritage. She's produced 2 award-winning documentaries, Expressions of ET Contact, a visual blueprint, and Expressions of ET Contact Communication, Healing Blueprint. She's also produced 5 meditation CDs, such as Inner Alchemy, and there's a link there. So I am going to print that underneath when we put this on YouTube, but meanwhile I'm just going to bring her on because we want to speak to her, don't we?
And next thing,
so where are we? I'm just going to bring her into the studio. Gosh, I'm so hot today. It's really hot in London, weirdly, but not sunny, just uncomfortably hot. So welcome to the show, and
came in and interviewed you.
It's good listening.
So that's how it's I didn't.
Mary,
Hello.
hello.
I didn't organise that, and
Lovely.
you then said, "Ooh,
Lovely
I
to
don't
hear
want to
you.
be involved
I've
with
got a little
Christine
bit of an
Hart and this
echo.
other
I'm going to
woman."
try and move
They
that away now
talk to
from
Palladians.
where
I
I
don't even
am
believe in the
and
existence
turn the
of
laptop off. So I've
Palladians.
just introduced you,
I
Mary,
have
and
done stuff
I've, of course,
which has kind of
watched
been
a
like
lot
Alex
of your
Collier's style
interviews and
about the
fantastic,
existence of
brilliant
the Greys.
interviews.
I do
And
believe in
you've
the
done so
existence
many
of the
lectures
Greys,
around the
whatever
world,
they
haven't
are.
you?
Are they military made?
Well,
Are
yes,
they
I do
what we
seem
used
to
to
get
call
about
demonic?
Christine from
Whatever they are, they do
from
exist. They are
work.
abducting people. They're abducting children. And they're abducting
That's
adults,
lovely.
and
That's
they're
lovely.
harvesting, and they're
So what
harvesting
started you
cattle.
on this?
They do
What
exist, whatever they
started you
are.
on this road
But I don't
down
believe that.
the ET road,
I don't speak
so
to
to speak?
Palladians. That's not
Down this
connected with
particular
Palladians.
rabbit hole,
I
you
don't
mean?
believe that there
Yes.
are good beings
Right.
coming to
Well,
save us.
it sort
No,
of is a
we're here.
progression
We're stuck
from,
with those beings, whatever they are, and
starting out
probably
as a nurse
demonic
and
realm
then a
because they're
midwife, going into the
interdimensional, and they're
counselling
having a massive
side of things,
effect
working in a
on this
medical
planet, a
practice in
massive
England,
effect on this world.
coming
Food is really
to and
expensive.
migrating
Somewhere
to
to live, the
Australia, and
basics are like really
then doing
expensive.
more
People are getting
counselling in
squashed. People are
grief and
getting depressed.
bereavement,
Young
in
people
all sorts of
committing
family issues,
suicides.
to the
There's so
point
many
where
stabbings
you get to
going
start
on. All this
exploring
is going
things
on,
from
and
another
Earth
level
is
of
getting to be a
trying to
pretty ugly
understand the
place
journey, the
to
human
be,
journey,
and it
really.
is
And
because
it
of
was
what is going on with these
it took
beings
me into doing
right now.
hypnosis,
I would say
past
probably it's a
lives,
demonic kind of thing,
looking
and
at
these are probably
really
end
what
times.
I feel is
So that's my
making
feeling.
sense of
So
our
I really
our
wish, Brian, that you
experiences
wouldn't like
until
disrespect me and
one
disrespect your
day a
thing.
gentleman walked
And
through the
so if
door
you
and he
talk to,
said
let's
to
say,
me,
people,
Mary,
oh,
I've
that
heard you're
girl, oh, she's like,
open-minded for this.
I
There's
can't
no
bear people
support
who talk
groups
to
for this. People
Palladians. I
just think
just
you're a
don't think
loony.
there's any such
And
thing
that
as
particular gentleman, who happens to
I
be a
just
very
don't
good
think there's any
friend of
such
mine
thing, and
now,
I think it takes away from the fact
that
that
he, used
these
to wake up
abductions are
with
going
marks on
on
his
by
body,
what I
shaved
believe to
areas.
be demonic
His family were all
entities.
having
Because when
the
people
same
call out
kind of
reduced price,
experiences.
then
Nobody'd
automatically
come to
it
the house because they
stops,
thought it was
meaning that it's a
demons.
demonic
And he said, can you
force.
help? And
So please don't
really, that
disrespect me.
started the
Please don't
journey.
disrespect my message
I
and
had
try and
read a couple
badmouth
of
me
books on this
on your
topic. One
YouTube
was by
falsely.
a
Okay,
former
I don't mind you
professor of
saying, oh
psychiatry, Dr.
yeah,
Don
the Greys,
Mack,
I don't believe in them,
who had written a
whatever.
book,
But don't
Abduction,
just
Human
disrespect
Encounters
me. You
with
know, I'm a
Aliens,
human
and
being.
another
I haven't
book
been a
witnessed
famous
by
boy
Whitley
band
Strieber, who was
singer.
an
I've
experiencer,
never been
called
famous. I've
Communion.
written a book, one of
And
which the
those
Sunday Times
two
bestseller.
became my
I've been on TV, I've
baseline
been on the
to
news, I've been on this thing.
realizing
I'm
that
obviously not
it
like
wasn't rare,
godlike
as I
fame
thought it
like you
was,
would
that this was
achieve. That
an
doesn't mean I'm not a
experience,
human
in
being.
fact, that's a
I
lot more
certainly
common
didn't
than
want
most
you on the
people
show to
realize.
in any
And
way threaten you
3,500
or
people
set
later,
you up,
families and
and
children, I
I
am
will
even
gladly
more
take down those
convinced that
shows
this is
if
a
you
global
wish.
phenomena that is
And the
affecting
next
many
thing
more
is, I
people
really don't want to
than
be in their
anyone has
chamber of
ever
horrors.
realized,
I
because
really
a lot
don't
of
want
people
to
don't
be in
realize
that
what it is they're
little
experiencing.
pastiche you've got on your bedroom
What?
wall
So
or
you're like a
basement
counselor.
wall. It
Eve
is really
Lorgan as
freaking
well
me
does a
out,
similar type of work.
and
She's an
I feel
American that you've heard
targeted,
about,
and it's
obviously.
really triggering me and making
Yeah,
me
I
feel
mean,
bad.
there's a
And
number.
I
Barbara
think as
Lamb's
well,
another one.
as a
Yvonne Smith.
targeted
A lot
individual
of them
myself,
are
that
good
is
friends of
targeting me.
mine.
And
That I know in the
I haven't done
States. There
anything
are
to
some
you,
that
but
work
it's
in this field
there, and
a
it's
little bit
like,
undercover in
oh,
the
bad
UK as
person sort
well.
of
But
thing. And
the
you
bottom
did say
line
that. You
was
said
I
that
had
person
no
said that person,
intention
but everyone else are all those
consciously that
wankers.
I
I'm
would
going to get them.
become,
I'm going to
this would
get them.
become a lot
So I
more
want
of
to
my
know, Brian,
specialist
and a lot of
work.
people have said just to
But as
ignore
I
him, but
realized
it's
that
out
more and
there.
more
There's
people were coming
12,000
to me and
subscribers to
found
you.
me,
They're all watching
I
it, and
decided that
I didn't hear
that
anybody
there were a lot
speaking
of
up for
other
me, apart from
supports
actually
out there
somebody
for
did
the
stick up for
most
me,
other
and then I saw it
experiences. But
got
as that
taken down.
gentleman, Ellis Taylor is his name, he
I
actually lives in
find
England now.
it
I realized that the bottom line was
just
that most people didn't
worrying
know where to
why
go,
you
who to
have
speak
of
to.
being
They
calling
didn't
yourself a
trust the
friend and
conventional
ringing me
supports,
often and
understandably
speaking to
so,
me and
in going
saying,
to a psychologist or a
you know,
psychiatrist,
I'm your
because
friend,
many
whatever.
of
And
those
somebody
are
said to
actually
me, a friend of mine
uninformed and
called
don't
Tim at
realize
Covent
that this
Garden,
is
he
real.
said to me,
So
so I decided to focus where I could help on this and created a CERN, which is the Australian Close Encounter Resource Network. But of course, now I'm involved more internationally, and I come to England quite a bit, to be quite honest. And I've done a number of venues in England, the Probe Conference, and a few others that in England itself, because I've got a lot of contacts there. But the main thing for me is the more you can inform people, the more they can start to make sense of their experiences. And that was why I wrote the book Awakening. It was a kind of resource book, if you like, for those that may have seen a bright light in the sky and may have had some strange things happen, which we call paranormal. Noticed that their awareness had shifted through these experiences or encounters or contacts. And from that, of course, I've come to realize that there's a very big picture going on here. A picture where people can start off being very fearful, but not necessarily at the end of a process, actually realizing that many of them shift and change in their awareness and consciousness. And that seems to be one of the major outcomes of this experience for most people.
I don't speak to Pleiadians.
I you probably don't know, Mary. In fact, I know you don't know. I had an experience with Grace myself, but mine was astral. You know, it was like being asleep and yet not being asleep, like they wake you up in the middle. Is a lot of the people that you've seen, are they having the actual like physical, oh, it's in the room and I'm awake, I know, or are they, I've gone to sleep and I'm awake but I'm not actually in that physical body?
Absolutely. And what is the reason why many UFO or ufologists struggle, especially what I call the nuts and bolts ones that still want to examine the craft, how long you saw it, how big it was, and how many people were with you, kind of thing, is that we've discovered through our research that 25% of the experience is physical, but 75% is non-physical. So it's, as you're saying, in an out-of-body state. Many will have their experiences in an out-of-body state, and that is primarily the reason it's been difficult for, even those within this field to be comfortable with the whole thing to do with having encounters, is because nobody can bring a piece of the spaceship back with them. But I have always said, as a therapist, that the changes that happen through that experience is your evidence, because people start, as you know from my work, people start to do unusual creative things, like they start to write unusual scripts, they may be doing unusual paintings or artwork, they may start coming out with what we call star languages or light language. But on top of that, they expand their psychic abilities, and that's everything from, seeing spirits to orbs to energy fields. They change their motivation in life. Often they don't want to live the way they did before. They lose interest in materialistic values. They want to live more holistic lifestyles. And their consciousness has shifted to a point where their whole focus is different. And there is your evidence of the reality.
And these people are doing interviews.
Yeah, exactly. But they're still using, I mean, my own experience, I found my mouth prized open and they were somehow, it was like going to the dentist kind of thing. Have you come across that kind of thing, that dentistry work, or going in through the mouth, examining?
Oh, many of those that I work with in hypnosis, when they're taken on board craft, will have a number of procedures. And sometimes it's medical procedures. They're taking genetic material. They will do healing, and a lot of our research in where I'm involved with the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation, what we've discovered in our surveys, and this is over 4,200 individuals globally, that 50% of those having experiences have healing experiences on board craft, and have, as I say, some of it's medical exams. Some of it is even having their consciousness moved while they have their brain worked on, their organic brain worked on. So they literally feel like they've been moved, their consciousness has been moved somewhere else. So there's a lot of procedures done that are very medical in nature, as you describe.
Why are they doing that to us?
Through the research that I've done, some is conscious recall, but some of it is through hypnosis, is that we're connected to them. And the bottom line is, when people say, what do you need to look to? I said, well, the clue is in our human DNA. the mere fact that there's a great deal of evidence now, and I write about it in detail in The New Human, because of my sources, whistleblower sources, geneticists, that have said without doubt we are a intelligently designed species, that we have indigenous DNA, but we also have in DNA from at least the possibility of 12 different non-human intelligences. So the reason they're interested in us is because we're part of them. And what's happening more and more as our DNA gets activated, we're connecting more and more to that part of our non-human, or if you like, the visitors or the star family we are part of. This has been the crucial reason, I believe, why more and more we're becoming aware of this, is because they are us and we are them. There is, we're inclined to say, or to think, not realize that we're actually hybrids. And that evidence is being very conclusive with whistleblowers, molecular biologists that have talked about this, whistleblower geneticists, that have said there's no doubt that they've seen in our DNA that we've been spliced, and part of our DNA has been spliced, and there's been things added to it. And one of them is 223 genes in our DNA that no other species on this planet has. And I was told about that by a geneticist who worked with Dr. Francis Crick, who was co-founder of the DNA molecule and was the Nobel Prize winner for that. And Dr. Crick himself actually said the same thing, that he believed that we had been intelligently designed. So why are they visiting us? Why are they interested in us and how we're evolving? Is because we're part of them. And this is something the children tell me, as well as adults, that they do this on many other planets in other star systems as well as planet Earth. This is part of the mandate of some of these higher intelligences.
What's the mandate?
And then what followed, which I won't.
The mandate is that they do a lot of genetic engineering for creating different species on lots of different planets apart from planet Earth. We're not the only planet they've done this to. And when you've got a 7 or 8 year old being tell you that they've been shown this kind of genetic engineering and had it explained to them by the beings that they, when they've been taken on a spacecraft or to another planet, and said, this is what we do in another planets too. We're creating different species to inhabit different planets, and they do that with animals, they do that with plants. We're not the only planet that it's experiencing this. It's something, it's part of a lot of what we would call the galactic community do as part of evolutionary traits. They're looking for different programs. And one of the interesting things that I'm noticing, and the reason we're seeing more and more craft these days, is because we've reached a technology now where we can see for ourselves that we've been genetically engineered, but also because we're creating technology that could damage not only our planet, but also impact on the galactic community. So the reason they're accelerating that process now, and I talk about the awakening and this activation of DNA, is because they want us to start growing up and mature and be aware of what we're doing. Because at the moment, we're in many ways, we're very, very primitive in the way that we still behave with one another. And that's why, star seeds, for example, say when they come and they're aware of their heritage, say, this is a very primitive planet, why on earth would I come down and incarnate here? Because it really is very hard to be here. And these are, I expect that's something maybe you felt as well.
That's horrible place. It's vile, isn't it? I can't wait to get out of here.
And they are probably the fallen
well, a lot of them say they want to go home, that this isn't home. And that's the reason for that is that you're really connected to that aspect of yourself that knows you're not from here, but on some level agreed to come and help this planet out with your awareness and with your abilities. And many, many understand that absolutely. And if I had $1 for every time somebody said to me, I want to go home, I don't like it here on this planet. It's too primitive, but they know they've got a mission, they've got something to do, and that's why in fact they've incarnated here, is because there's a big program to upgrade this planet into a higher awareness or a higher consciousness.
How do they, I mean, I've noticed in myself, it's funny you should say, like I was always psychic and used it in my job, like psychometry and other psychic stuff. I've started doing, working as it and doing readings. And I put in my advert medium, but I thought, well, I don't want to be one of those boring people, you know, that say, oh, I can see your mum now and she's still got a blue rinse or something like that, you know. But I started, when I see people, immediately their relatives come through and start talking, you know, start talking to me, and it's quite creepy. I find it creepy that I can do it, and yeah, I mean, is that, how are they upgrading us without touching us?
I don't want to see it.
Well, they are touching us on multiple levels, actually. But when you say this is creepy, actually, what it is part of our heritage to be multidimensional. We, all of us have that capability to access other dimensions, other realms, see spirits, communicate with them. We all have the ability to do all of this, and the new kids coming in, the new generations, are also doing this quite naturally. It's not something they have to be taught, and you know, they will explain to you also their awareness of where they've come from. I mean, I've talked to 6, 7, and 8-year-olds that tell me what planet they've come from, and they'll come in.
What are they saying? What planet?
Okay, right. Give you one example of a 9-year-old who wanted to speak to me from the US. I was speaking to his father, and he said, I'd like to speak to Mary. And I said to him, so why is it you want to speak to me? He says, well, it's because of your frequency. And then he proceeded to tell me he was from Orion. He had been a light physicist working on time travel technology, and then he'd come to this planet to help with to bring this technology to this planet. So that was one of his mandates. But he's not the only one. I was speaking to a 10-year-old only a few months ago that told me about the past planet he was on. He even drew the form he was in on that planet and said, this is my first time on planet Earth, but luckily my mum's been here many times, so she helps me to get used to being here. This is the awareness of these new generations I write about in The New Human, because they have come with a mission. They know they've come here to help. Some of them have come as healers. Some of them have come to work with different energies around the planet. One young 10-year-old told me he's come as a center seed to connect with the center of the planet, deal with evolution on the planet. This is the kind of awareness these new children are coming in with, and then they're the new programs to help us with this shift in consciousness as we start to awaken and get activated, and to realize our own, if you like, why we're here and why we had to understand our connection to these intelligences.
So what, the boy that said what form he was in, what form, what did he describe?
He actually drew it for me, and it was a blue form, straight, the head was a little bit strange, but it was still humanoid. And down one side were symbols, and he explained to me what those symbols were. I actually showed it in one of my presentations recently. But he said this last planet he was on, he was rescued from because it had blown up, and he'd come in his first incarnation to this planet, and he knew he'd come to help with what's going on in terms of evolution and what have you. This child, his mother says, you know, works with crystals. He sees energies. He is very aware of his mission, and he's all of 10 years old.
Wow. And what planet was he from? Because we've heard of the blues, haven't we? They're small, aren't they? They're kind of small.
This one, I'm just trying to remember what name. He did have a name for it, but it wasn't one that I recognized. Although some will say, you know, planetary systems we're aware of, whether or not it's, you know, the Pleiades, Orion, or Andromeda. One of the 17-year-olds I spoke to from New Zealand told me he was from Arcturus, and he was an Arcturian ambassador, and he's come to this planet to be an ecological engineer. He's come to create a new kind of ecology and habitat for this planet. So they come in with the knowing of what their abilities are and what they need to do here. And when you talk about your awareness, that is very natural to all of them. They'll often have precognition. They'll be aware of events before they happen. Many of them have telepathic abilities, and particularly as a child, they're aware, and the parents are aware that they can actually tap into their thinking as well, which can be pretty confronting. They'll see spirits like you do, and what have you. But this is all part of our natural abilities. This is not something that's unique at all. It just means that some people have not, if you like, allowed themselves to open up in that way to access that multidimensional side of ourselves. But this is a natural thing.
What symbols did he have down? I'm just fascinated by what is that in your book, a picture of him?
No, not in the New Human. This is he described what each symbol was, and it looked a bit like Chinese writing. But I've got it when I spoke at Contact in the Desert a few weeks ago, I actually showed the slide of him. I mean, I can send you the slide of what he looked like and what he described of the symbols, because I can send you that so you can actually see for yourself.
Yeah. But what did he say they were?
One was about him and his origins. I can't remember the bottom one now. I'd have to go back to the slide. But what it was interesting that he put symbols on the side of on one leg, and I've never seen that before. But and he did understand what the symbols meant. Some of the children even speak the light languages, and a 9-year-old, his mother said to me that the 9-year-old will speak to her in light language. She'll speak back to him, but her son actually knows what he's saying, and she doesn't know what she's saying back to him. But this is happening more and more. People, as they get activated, start speaking these languages. Many of them have origins from their star connection, whether it's from a different planetary system or not. And it's almost like as the DNA gets activated, that's part of the star system, they start to then speak these languages as well, which seem to be connected to these star systems.
And what about the normal person, the average person who isn't developed in a way psychically? How are they upgrading them, or can't they reach them?
I think the first of all is we're all being upgraded, but it depends on your awareness and how much you're aware of this happening. We've got frequencies hitting the planet at the moment that's upgrading. Things like the crop circles have frequencies. Just listening to some of this information is an activator. That they're all frequencies. Frequencies in people that are already activated. If you're around them, you'll find yourself being activated. Listening to the languages can activate you. All of these different things. The music people are creating that have had contact, for example, can activate you. Excuse me, I need a...
Sorry, what was the last thing you said, Mary? I didn't hear that last thing.
The music. Some of them are creating music. That can be an activator too.
Right. Wow, it's kind of creepy, isn't it? I'm thinking bricks. It's a bit creepy.
Oh, I think it's quite fascinating that we are being assisted to evolve by a number of these intelligences that happen to be our ancestors. Yeah. Because, the bottom line is that we are a part of them, and they are allowing us now to be at a point where we can start evolving into something greater than we've ever been before, with abilities that we've never had or we've not realized that we've got. And that actually is quite wonderful, because let's face it, at the moment, all that most humans seem to do is look at ways of destroying things, whether or not it's each other or it's the environment or whatever. And we've really got to change and grow up and evolve into something, into a new kind of human that actually cares about each other and cares about our planet and the environment, and realize that we're all part of this consciousness. You know, we're all.
But aren't they, Mary? Aren't they? Or they sound like the. I don't know. I mean, there's all these different ones: greys, reptilians, and tall whites. Don't they all sound like the Anunnaki who fiddled with us when we were supposed to be the human monkey, and they came in and gave us that bit of intelligence that we really can't cope with because, you know, we created horrible things like pornography, and, you know, we're not nice, really. We're like animals that have been given a little bit of power that we shouldn't have, maybe, and now they're fiddling again. Do you think they sound like the Anunnaki? Wasn't there a thing Robert Stanley did about Enki wanting to upgrade us, whoever Enki is?
They're one of a number of species that have added their DNA to ours. There's not just the Anunnaki. We have, and it seems to be more and more with the research that I've done, that we have at least 12 different types of DNA that are the non-human, or from our visitors, if you like. And the whole point is that we were limited and shut down, and that we've had this dormant DNA. What's happening now is that it's because we've reached a certain level of awareness and technology, these star visitors, whatever name you want to call them. And remember, there's not just, you know, the reptilians and the greys and the tall whites. There's crystalline beings, there's light beings, there's mantis beings, there's a whole range of feline beings, humanoids. We've got a matrix of intelligences visiting us, and not all of them are actually physical. Some of them are biological, but some of them are interdimensional, some are extra-dimensional, some are trans-dimensional, some are visitors from our future. So we've got all these different intelligences interacting with us, and our DNA has within it at least 12 from different species, and they've all got different agendas. But the primary agenda, and this is what has been important, is that those that have had these experiences, 85% of them ultimately, out of the 4,200, 85% noticed a psycho-spiritual transformation. Now, if they wanted us to stay as we were, limited and what have you, we would not be seeing that as an outcome. And that's huge, because up to now, most have been focusing on the fear side of this. And it's scary and they're out to get us and what have you. If they were out to get us, to be honest, they could have got us for hundreds of years, because let's face it, you know, why wait till we've got some technological advantage? There's no point to that. So we have to understand, and it's very clear to me, that if they'd wanted to take us out or to keep us limited, they would have done it many hundreds of years before now, and they haven't. So that tells you something.
I noticed, I saw as well, it was around when Stephen Greer came here, I was looking out the window and I thought, that's an odd formation. It was about 2 a.m, an odd formation in the sky. It seemed like lace. And I thought, oh, that's so pretty. So I got up and looked, and then they started moving, and they were moving to one side, and then they came like they were above the house, and they were like orbs, these orbs, and they vanished pretty quickly. What are they, those orb things? Are they connected with the whole thing?
Absolutely. Catherine, one of the things that I've discovered, and I find the orbs fascinating, is that they can contain, if you like, our essence or our soul essence. And I'll give you an example of that. I was talking to a young lady who was on the spacecraft, and she had noticed that she wasn't in her human body, but she was in another form. And I said, what are you doing in the other form? She said, well, I'm acting as a scientist on board craft. And I said, so how do you get back to your human body? And she described a ball of light, an orb, if you like. And that went into it. So sometimes when we're traveling out of body, that's the form we take. It's called a Merkaba, or our energy body of light, if you like. And that's our essence. So some of the orbs are spirits, but not all of them. Some of those orbs you're seeing in the sky are craft. So when you're seeing those lights in the sky, and if you're seeing them or you find yourself going out and just noticing them, it's usually because they want you to notice them. And it's because on some level, they have a connection to you, often as not. When people see these lights and take pictures of them, and they'll say, oh, I had a sighting, Mary, you know, it was at this time and what have you. 9 times out of 10, I will send them a questionnaire because I'm pretty certain there was a reason why they saw them. And it usually is because in some way, it's like they're saying, hi, we're here and you're ready to see us.
Oh, I'd like a questionnaire.
Okay, well, I'll send you one. I've got one for adults and one for children. And you'd be surprised at how many people have not realized that they were actually having some form of contact because they just thought they were a bit different or a bit weird, and no one else had these kinds of experiences. And there are patterns that I have noticed when someone is an experiencer, and it's to do with sensing, knowing, feelings, as well as have you seen UFOs, but also other heightened awareness, those abilities that you're noticing in yourself are all part of this activation of getting us to a higher level of consciousness. This is about us evolving into a more aware, sentient being, and we're being assisted to do that through our connection with these intelligences.
Oh, that's interesting. I noticed lately that my life appears like almost like spinning out of control, and it's almost like I feel like I've died and I'm becoming something different and sort of letting go of the other me, and my life seems like it's chaos, but it's like financially, you know, it's like nothing's going right, and then people around sort of almost like attacking in some kind of way that I recognize is a kind of frequency, but it's making me, it seems like tough love in a way, but it's making me connect less to material and less worldly things and more to my own inner kind of, you know?
I do. And what has fascinated me over the last few years is so many are experiencing similar things.
Oh, really?
It's been huge. And I know that a lot of people expected something in 2012 and didn't feel anything happened. Well, actually, on another level, the numbers of people that have said their life turned around from that time and they completely changed focus. Everything that used to make sense of them didn't make sense anymore. They wanted to live very differently, and they noticed their awareness has really heightened in tremendous ways. And it's not just through seeing UFOs either. Some have had it happen through a near-death experience or out-of-body experiences, or they've done a shamanic journey and it's woken them up, or it may be through learning healing. And then they all start to communicate or see spirits, see angels, or see light beings, or start to feel that they are connecting with different forms of intelligence. So it's not just through seeing bright lights in the sky and having that kind of encounter. As soon as you get shifted in consciousness, as I say, through a near-death experience or a profound grief experience, that seems to raise your frequency so that you start to expand in all these ways. And part of that is communicating then with these particular intelligences.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I noticed, I don't know if anybody, any of your people have noticed a feeling of being targeted almost, and then kind of becoming stronger through that kind of events in your life, you know, where it seems like you're getting bad luck happen to you, but it makes you stronger.
I honestly believe that from my work with past lives and people remembering, choosing their life journey coming into this incarnation, that, the soul self creates the challenges for us each lifetime to learn from and to grow from. And I agree with you. I think sometimes it's more our attitude to it that is the choice that we have. We can choose to see something as a learning, if you like, experience, even though it be painful and difficult, but we can learn if you learn from it rather than see yourself as a victim, then you're actually growing in understanding. And I think that's what this is all about, all these things that are changing. And yes, you'll find the more you become more awake, you're going to have less and less people understand that. You may have to find new friends that are on the same page as you, for example, but also losing interest in things that don't feed your soul, such as materialistic things and what have you. Part of that is all part of this awakening that's happening across the planet.
It is difficult. I mean, since I've been having more and more of the speaking to the dead for other people, I went to a local medium church and they were doing mediumship, but in a very light way. You know, it was all I can sense someone, I can say. And I thought, well, I'm not going to make friends here because, and I wanted to be with other people that were doing the same thing because it does feel odd. But I thought, well, they're not sort of moving on that same level, you know, and I thought they might not like me saying, well, I can speak directly to the dead, you know, as you call them. They're not dead, I suppose, if they're busy speaking. It's hard to know where they are. It's weird.
Catherine, they're just a different frequency, but they're all around us all the time, and you can talk to them, as you realized, without making this a big deal. The thing is, in these kinds of groups, one of the hardest things some people have found is they're in a group where they're trying to enhance their awareness and, you know, their mediumship. But they'll say to me, Mary, what's been a problem for me is my spirit guide isn't a normal human. It's a blue being with black eyes, and they don't like that because they don't think it's spiritual. Well, actually, they're all in the same realm. You know, these beings, these different forms. It's you know, for some people they may see an angel, for someone else it'll be a light being, but it's exactly the same thing. It's just our interpretation of it. But I know what you're saying. The problem is too, there's the human side is if you show that you're better at something than someone else, you're always going to get a certain amount of people that don't like that, and they're not comfortable with the fact that you can perhaps have more awareness than they are. But it's not a competition.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and also there's the Christian side. I mean, I have friends that say, oh, you're practicing necromancy, and you know, and then they say that all these beings are demons, and you know, so there's that Christian thing. And sometimes I think, is it right? Does God approve? You know, that kind of, does God approve of more awareness? Because, you know, you've got that Bible, you've got the whole Bible thing going on. Well, I do anyway.
Look, coming from being a Catholic, I fully understand the dilemma, and I've written a whole chapter on what I call the God chapter in The New Human, because two ministers of religion, I actually helped put something in that chapter for me, and both of them have expanded their Christianity to embrace the fact that they talk to non-human intelligences, for example, and have memories of past lives, etc. One of them's been a minister of religion for 40 years and said that, you know, he really has felt really bad because he feels like he's been a hypocrite, because he's been promoting a dogma that actually is limited, and that he's had all these other experiences. So you can embrace it, but you just got to expand it in a way that doesn't necessarily conflict with the message, which the Christian message, which is about loving one another. Let's face it, the bottom line is really don't do to other people's what you wouldn't have done to yourself. If you take in some of the dogma that has been put there, and if people explore where that dogma came from, not all of it came from Christ, and the stories around Christ. So it just means you've got to explore it from a deeper level, and it won't conflict with what these beings are telling us, which is to be loving to one another and to appreciate that we're all connected and that we treat each other with respect. That's the message that they have, and that's where they want us to start to grow up and treat each other with respect. So it doesn't conflict with the Christian message. It may conflict with some of the dogma that has been put there, and a lot of that dogma has been altered and changed by various agencies through the hundreds of years, and isn't necessarily a direct reflection of what everyone believes, Christ talked about. So there is a conflict there. But the bottom line is that, it's all about us treating each other with respect. And there is a higher source of love and unconditional love that we can all subscribe to, even if we have different names for it. It's the same thing, So it's just a matter of expanding that in a way where, we embrace it from a broader paradigm, if you like.
I came into the truth movement through, it was somebody introduced me to Miles Johnson, because they said, after reading a book I'd written about my life, that I was one of the monarch, so they call them super soldiers, that's a silly name. And I'd grown up in an orphanage. It was Vatican run, Crusader Rescue. And I'd gone then into investigation agencies that were run by ex-military intelligence people. And I found myself doing undercover work for them. Then I moved to work for Fleet Street. And then I found myself doing a lot of work with terrorist organizations. And I came out of doing that. And I seemed to involve my sexuality. And these people that contacted me said to me that, I got different altars and they'd been used for different things. But what I found interesting, and we were talking about it on a show last week, is the alien involvement in the programs in these monarch. Have you heard of these military programs?
Yes, I have. And I've met many that have been involved in my lab as well as MK Ultra and what have you. And there's many of those that are experiencers that have had experience and encounters that have also been picked up by the military and covert agencies involved with these programs. And people don't realize that some of the most traumatized are the ones that have had human abductions by the military and been treated, drugged, traumatized, beaten, all this kind of thing has happened. Because what happens with my lab is when they abduct them, the main purpose is to find out what experiences you've had on board craft, what you've learnt, what your abilities are, anything that they can get from your experiences for their information. And then they will do their best to reprogram you so that you never talk about this and terrorize you. And this is when I get the ones that are really damaged, are the ones most times from my lab, not from those that have been taken on board craft. And the other thing with that is people don't realize that there are what's known as program life forms. And these are, if you like, they look ET, but they're actually not. They've been, if you like, created through the genetic material to look like greys or to look like reptilians, but in fact they're programmed life forms. They're not extraterrestrial. And people may see these in underground bases and think they're extraterrestrial. So it's a very complex thing, and it's not straightforward as we'd all like to see it, the us and them, the good, the bad, and what have you. You've got to know about these other programs and the complexity of this before you can start working out who is really benevolent and who isn't.
Yeah, that's interesting. What do you think happened to me since I was got as a child? Did they maybe think I was psychic as a child and then sort of start prodding and then put me in a program? Is that how they do it?
The bottom line is we're all psychic, but there are some more gifted than others. And certainly if there's an opportunity for those agencies to get hold of, and I know they do this with children, and usually children that are vulnerable and they've got no oversight. We know that happens in many countries where if there's no one to take care of you in children's homes, and they're very easily can access children to use in these programs. And it is, of course, very possible that especially if you have a sense yourself that this will have been part of perhaps your, what happened to you. And there are ways for you to explore that more, and you're already very intuitive, but you can always get hypnosis and check out more of what may be there about your own experiences if that's what you feel inclined to do.
It's expensive though, isn't it, all that kind of thing?
Well, it depends on what you mean by expensive. I mean, you know, I know a number of hypnotherapists in England that I think are very fair in terms of what they're doing. The main thing is that they've got to be, if you like, au fait with this kind of thing, and not all hypnotherapists are. So not everyone's going to be comfortable. I know a few that are aware, you know, who I trained to work with experiencers, and many of them are intuitives as well. So they're not only working as a hypnotherapist on one level, on another level, they're working through their own intuitive nature and awareness as well. So that gives them an added tool to help someone get the information that they need to help them understand what's going on with them. And not everyone needs weeks and weeks of this kind of thing. I mean, with many people I work with, unless it's, you know, major complexity, 1 or 2 sessions is all that's needed, and sometimes only one. So, you know, if you're looking at it from that perspective, it doesn't mean you're going to have to go for weeks or years of paying for this. It may only be a few sessions, and you've got what you need.
Oh, that's interesting. I'd like to get a number off you for something like that. That would be interesting. I've got lots of, you know, mystery around my past, and, you know, not feeling I was much in control of my life, feeling that it was very much just someone else's agenda. You know, I'd have things like, oh, write a book about the real IRA, go out, have an affair with one of the leaders of the real IRA, and then this person contacted me after reading my book and said, no, you were doing that for someone else. And looking back now, it feels like I was really, really driven, but there was no, yes, I did get stories in the paper and I got my name out there, but there was no big payoff, you know, for so much work.
I understand. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's horrible that they do that. So that is humans rather than aliens doing that kind of psychic activity. What would you call it? It's really evil, really, isn't it?
It's my lab, the military abductions. They have the technology to abduct you just like the ETs do. There is a suggestion, of course, we've got the program life forms. There is a suggestion that some species work with our military. And whether or not that's, you know, we know there's program life forms that look like greys, whether or not there are true greys or others, some reptilians working with the military, that's always possible as well. The trouble is, we don't get the full story because we don't know what's going on behind the scenes other than what people through hypnosis or through flashbacks or conscious memory are telling us, and that may not be the full story. Because, you know, once you've gone in those programs, you know, your memories get messed about as well. So it's very hard sometimes to work out, you know, all the information from that experience unless you've got people who are very good at helping you through that. So this is part of the problem. We don't know what the military knows. We don't know what they know about these intelligences either. And that's part of what makes my job difficult, is that when I'm working with someone, I have to just work with what their awareness is and what their understanding is to help them make sense of it and join the dots for their lives or what have you. But it can be very, very useful and can often change their mind about the way they view their experiences in a very positive way, often as not.
So how are the military doing this? I mean, obviously they're not using normal run-of-the-mill soldiers. Are they using psychics in these labs, as you call them? They're using psychics to do all this abduction and all this?
They have technology in the same way that ETs have technology to pick somebody up. And remember, sometimes it's physical, sometimes it's non-physical. So, you know, when you're out of body. But they have the same kind of technology. And so they're able to do it. They're able to abduct you.
Right. And by technology, you don't mean like a computer thing. You mean something else, like this Merkaba thing.
Well, the thing is, there is technology that the ETs, they've got a lot of technology we already know, perhaps 30 years in advance of what we get in the public eye, there's technology at least 30 years in advance of that they've got. And one of them is the way of manipulating time, and they can actually do that and pick people up. And that this is the technology where they'll take them down to underground bases, and then they will interrogate them, drug them, etc. There's a very interesting book that I wrote the foreword for called Facing the Shadow, Embracing the Light by Niara Isley. And she was in my lab. She had my lab experiences. And she remembered them only once she was doing body work. And then she started to get flashbacks about how she'd been picked up. So if someone wants to know the full story of how it is, that's a particularly good one to get.
Right. I've written that down. That sounds good. Yeah, there's so many people out there that are sort of telling stories and they're not proper. And you can tell listening to them and you think, oh, no, not another person coming forward that's saying things that aren't true. You can kind of hear it somehow, you know, and that's kind of flooding everywhere, and then it stops people from getting real info. Do you know what I mean?
I think we're all being tasked because there's disinformation out there. There are some that may not be accurate because their memory is scattered and they try and fill it in. The other thing is that more than anything, it's about us learning to resonate to the truth of what we're hearing. And that's all we have at the end of the day, Catherine, isn't it? Is to listen to our own resonance, to something that feels right against something that doesn't. And there is a lot of disinformation out there. There's a lot of people, you know, that are only, or they may quite genuinely believe that this is, you know, fully their experience, and only because they've maybe got bits of it and they've connected the dots in the best way they can. We can only go on patterns of experience, and I can tell you now that we've isolated through my own research and through the free organization, we've managed to find out some really important patterns of experience that seem to be relevant for most people who have this experience. And that has been the best guide to finding out what's actually going on.
Oh, right. I'd love to fill in one of them if that's possible. That would be interesting.
Yeah. I can send you the questionnaire, and it'll be interesting to see how many of those indicators that you have. And this is something I compiled after hearing the same things over and over again from so many different people, and you get to get a real sense
Listen
and
to Revolutionary
picture of what's going on. When there's enough people saying the same thing, you know that it has integrity. And that's really, and mine is different because I go into knowing, feelings and sensing, because I'm going into the
my name is Mr. Rowe.
side of your
I am the host of Reality Extraction on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I utilize logic, intellect, and magic to methodically automatize, vivisect, analyze, examine, study, scrutinize, and extract an essence of reality from a fog of illusion and confusion. You can find me on Studio B every Thursday at 1700 hours Pacific Time. That's 8 p.m. Eastern. No topic taboo, no subject too strange. I strive to take a neutral standpoint during the dissection of the topic at hand. That's Reality Extraction with Mr. Rowe on Revolution Radio.
The two main ones that I saw, they had ultras, and I always felt when I met them that they hadn't been the ones that had done the murders, which is kind of weird.
Well, it just shows that you've got a really.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
syndicalist commune. We take it in turns to act as a sort of executive officer for the week. Yes. But all the decisions of that officer have to be ratified at a special bi-weekly meeting. Yes, I see. By a simple majority in the case of purely internal affairs. Be quiet. But by a 2/3 majority in the case of more... Be quiet. I order you to be quiet. Look, you stupid bastard, you've got no arms left. Yes, I have. Look! It's just a flesh wound.
I don't believe I've seen such a display of courage, skill, nerve, grace, and stupidity.
I'll do you for that. You what? Come here. What are you going to do, bleed on me? I'm invincible. You're a loony. The Black Knight always triumphs.
Roundtable Live Monday through Friday, 1 a.m. till 4 a.m. Eastern Time. Bring your mind, bring your ideas, bring your voice. King Arthur had nothing on us here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com.
Extendivite really works. Just listen to what some people have to say.
Several years ago, I was developing a very severe situation. I called it my flippy heart. It was doing not good things, and I did not want to go to a medical doctor because I just knew they would give me a cover-up pill. I didn't want to get onto that sort of thing at all. When I learned it was garlic and cayenne is a healer. It is a wonderful herb. I said, I think I'm onto something here. I'll tell you, I wouldn't be without it. It did wonderful things for me.
Extendivite is only $69.95 for a 2-month supply of either capsules or liquid. Call now. That's 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hi, Mary. You still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Great. I think they've played their adverts. It's annoying that, because I'm in the UK here and they're in America, that sometimes I can't hear the ads playing. But, oh, okay. Somebody's coming on. Jerry. Thank you, Jerry. Oh, okay. Server is all yours. Okay. Okay, so hopefully, Jerry, can you tell me if the music has stopped playing there for the adverts, please? If you're there, thank you. I think they have, Mary, so that's fine. So welcome back to the show, Mary Rodwell, and this is fascinating. Everything you've been saying. I was most fascinated, I think, about the feline beings. What are they called, these cat beings, and where are they from?
Well, some of them come from Lyra, but you've got the felines, you've got the lion beings, and many, many people relate to the felines and feel they're connected to them in some way. Some of them even see them as their spirit guides and protectors. And particularly the lion beings are renowned for protecting planet Earth. One of some may know of James Gilliland and his ESETI ranch in Washington State. He very much connects to the lion beings as well. So what I'm saying is that there are many different forms of these intelligences coming from all over the cosmos. And, there's almost every form you can imagine that can be one of these intelligences. So we've really got to broaden our perspective on who visits us and also who we're connected with.
Yes. Do you think maybe in ancient Egypt they were more because they had all those gods that were animals, like Ibis was a bird. Is there bird beings, avians?
Absolutely.
Where are they from? Sorry.
Oh, I'm not absolutely certain with the bird-like beings. I can't tell you. But some of the intelligences come from other dimensions as well as some of the people that I've connected with that say they've come here from another dimension. One of them was a 10-year-old in England, actually, that told me he came through a portal in the sun. He was very aware he came from another dimension. There was an artist that I write about who's a young man in The New Human who said that he comes from another dimension, and his artwork is specifically created to actually activate people by activating perception when they look at it. So it acts as a trigger, if you like, through his creativity. So there are many ways that these new humans, including some of the older generations that have come in with abilities through their creativity to activate the rest of us and get us more aware of what we are and who we are.
And have you got that picture?
Oh, I have, but I'd have to. What I'll need to do is I'll send it to you. I've got to pick it out from my PowerPoint. I haven't got it up at the moment, but I can certainly send it to you later.
Oh, excellent! Thank you. So it's so interesting. So where do the gods? Because mentioning the Egyptians, they were very. If you look, I often go to the British Museum looking at all their artifacts. They were so beautiful and the way they lived, and so they seemed a lot closer. I mean, are there many different gods, or the God in the Bible, Yahweh? Where does he come in?
Well, I've come to the conclusion, and it's certainly being more and more accepted, that what we called gods in over mythology and in the Bible were actually ETs. We only saw them as gods simply because they had abilities or technology that we didn't have, and it was seen as godlike because more primitive man, that's the way they judged it. And one of the interesting stories that I've wrote about was a young man from India who wrote to me and said, Mary, my biggest problem is that I know I'm a starseed. He said, but the rest of my countrymen, my relatives and my family, they're still worshipping extraterrestrials that they think are gods. He said that we've got about 100 gods in India. He says, and they're worshipping them, Mary. And the thing is, they're not gods. They're just extraterrestrials. And he said, I can't explain that to them because they don't realize that. Ganesha, for example, is one. I've had images of Ganesha as a being that people have been that have visited people who've had encounters, not as a god, but as a higher aware being, spiritual being, but certainly not a god. So I think we've got to really look a little bit more in a modern day vernacular of what were interpreted as gods, because I think in modern day, once you realize that it's often it's just technology, or it's the fact that they certainly may be more intelligent than us and maybe more aware than us, it doesn't make them a god. And so we've really got to start looking at that from a modern perspective.
Yeah, I felt a strong. I was brought up a Catholic, Bible rammed down my neck, and I didn't connect with the Bible or anything. But then recently, it was weird. I started recognizing the magic in the Bible with Moses and Yahweh, and was drawn to have quite a strong connection, which seems to be growing, with Yahweh, whoever that might be. But I do feel that, it comes to me quite a lot, almost daily. Have you heard of what Yahweh might be?
Well, I think Yahweh is like many of the others. I think it certainly is a more advanced intelligence, but it doesn't make Yahweh a god. I think that's just been an interpretation we've given to beings that have abilities greater than us. I think we have to be careful of how we understand God, and my sense is that God can be interpreted in many ways depending on your perspective. Interestingly, I talked to a 9-year-old in Scandinavia who told me her understanding of God was that it wasn't male or female, there was no gender, and she called it an ultra-terrestrial. that lived in the dayland, which she called the land of love, light, and angels, and we come from there. But she didn't say it had any particular gender at all. That's how she understood God. I think most of these intelligences do accept a higher spiritual being, but it is quite in the form that we are inclined to make or to create as a way of understanding what that intelligence is. The universal source, as some would say, or, the cosmic intelligence, or whatever name, it certainly isn't in a particular form.
Yeah, which seems to me to be a love form.
That's right. Yeah.
And interesting. But I suppose it doesn't matter connecting if you find yourself connecting to, like Yahweh, for instance. I don't suppose it matters. I'm thinking I don't want to be connecting to something bad,
No, and look, the interesting thing is that when people open up multidimensionally and have spirit guides and have their teachers, they're not gods, but they are more advanced spiritual beings. They're more aware, and like we all look for guidance to do the right thing and to be better as people and to be more evolved. We connect to those kinds of frequencies of being. And if you're connecting to that on some level, that's the frequency that makes the most sense. Like someone, connecting to the Christ energy, if you like, or the Christ frequency. That's all it is you're connecting to that kind of awareness and that love energy and that unconditional love, which epitomized, Jesus, really. To me, what you're really connecting to is that concept, that message, which was about love. And I don't think there's anything in the least wrong with that.
Yeah, it's interesting that, I found lately as well, having that grow in you, that multi-dimensionality, that there's also that there is warfare going on that level. There is, on our level as well, there does seem to be dark and light, and there does seem to be, you almost have to become a magician in a certain way. You almost have to study the ins and outs. So, for instance, when I started coming into the truth movement, I'd always been attacked astrally, and I thought, you can't do anything about that, but lie there and take it. And it was just through mixing with other people that I learned, you can fight back, fight back really hard. And it's strange that our world, we don't really, apart from if you move in the esoteric areas, that we don't know about that. And it's almost, you have to become shamanic. And it's strange because there's not that much information out there unless, you go to a specialist bookshop or, tune into the Truth of Community. And it's quite odd, our world, isn't it? It is, like you say, a bit prehistoric in a way.
The way that I look at it, that we've come and incarnated into a reality that has the dark and the light as a way of learning. So, you don't learn a lot if everything is beautiful and you get everything right. The only way you learn anything is to make mistakes. And when you make mistakes, they're sometimes painful, but through them, you gain a great deal of learning. And you don't know what it is, what pain is, unless you've actually experienced it. So I think that a lot of our experiences, we are inclined to interpret them in a negative way, when in fact they're ways of learning what is loving and what isn't loving. And the you learn that is to have duality. So I don't see it as good as bad. I just see it as a way of learning. You've got two children and you say that this hot plate is, you can say to one child, this is hot, and don't touch it because you're going to get burnt. You can say that to another child, and they've got to touch it first before they get the message that it burns you. No way is right. It's just different ways of learning, and we don't get that unless we've got something to learn from, which is contrast, which is what is loving and what isn't loving. We that good or bad. Well, I don't put those terms on it. I just say there are different ways to learn what's loving and what isn't loving, and sometimes one of them is painful, and that's the way we learn from it.
Yes, I was feeling lately that experiencing poverty, And I don't know why I'm an intelligent woman. I don't know why my life has sunk into that. Can't find work. And I've got to that position, and money being short, and then bailiffs, and then eviction, and all that. And I had a friend who was always going through that when I was working. And yes, I did give him bits and bobs of money, but looking back, really, I should have done more. But when I was in my position of being blessed with money, with an easy life, a job I liked, I couldn't see how much pain he was in. And the other day I was like, my car had broken down and it was smoking and smoke everywhere and nobody could fix it. And I thought, well, what do I do? You know, it's my last asset I've got. And I sat there and cried and cried. And the main thing I was crying about was my friend. And I thought of him all the times when, you know, he'd been like that. He'd been in bad situations. He couldn't afford heating, and how I just sort of not really listened, you know, and not really seen how much terrible pain he was in, and actually turned around and helped him more than I did. And I was crying really about him rather than myself.
Yeah. Well, as you say, it often we have to experience something before we get the empathy or the understanding. And some would say, well, that's terrible because you've been in pain and you've been uncomfortable, but often we don't take notice until we have something like that happen. And then we get it. We get it because we've experienced it ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, I saw a guy begging outside a shop with no legs and a wheelchair, and I thought, here's me feeling like so bad about my life. And look at him. He can't walk. He's in a wheelchair. He was unwashed. He was covered in scabs. I thought, well, what about him? And he'd moved when he got some money to give him, and he'd moved. And I literally was chasing him around this town to try and give him some money. And if I hadn't experienced like the terror of bailiffs and eviction, I never would have done that. I would just say, oh God, he smells, and held my nose and went in the shop and tooted that, you know, we have, oh my God, you know, people looking ugly on the street when I'm trying to have a nice time, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And that's what I think this is all about in the big picture stuff, is that we've come in with a mandate to not only grow as a soul, but also perhaps to help this planet evolve into a higher awareness. And that's part of the mission that many people feel.
Yeah. What about the exactly what I'm certainly feeling mine is softening and growing. It's a bit sort of slam dunk, but it's happening. I mean, you know, even the other day, and I was feeling sorry for myself in the garden, and I thought, you know, and I spoke to God because it's happening now. I'm speaking more. And I said, you know, God, you expect me to pray to you, or whoever this being was, and you expect me to talk to you. You want communication to go back and fro. But why should I do that when my life is full of just paying bills and electricity bills and all that? And he communicated back to me, but I was there in the mundane. And then I got these images, and they were images of when I was driving my car and it was smoking everywhere. There was this guy pulled up alongside me, and he made a big fuss of winding down his window. Oh, you wind down your window. Oh, what the hell? Is he going to complain about the smoke? And he wound down, he goes, are you okay? I'm really worried. Are you okay? And then there was the AA guy when he came to pick me up. He spent an hour and a half trying to fix my car in the pouring rain. The guy was soaked, and they're not even supposed to do that, but he saw I was upset, and he stood there trying to fix it. And even when I was sitting on the phone for an hour and a half to electricity people with this bill, I was trying to sort out. My son came home from school, was sitting next to me in the sunshine, and I was noticing how beautiful his hair looked, you know, and how it was glinting in the sun. And the being communicated to me, I'm there. I was there all the time, even though, you know, those bad, horrible, mundane, what I see as really horrid experiences, there was these rays of sun shooting at me all the time. And he said to me, I was there with you, you know? Made me feel quite humble because I can crave that glamour of life, you know, like Kardashian lifestyle, and crave that and think how they must feel so secure and how it must feel good, you know?
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're doing a lot of shifting and changing in your own awareness from what you're telling me.
Yeah, I mean, and it's all good, but it's, you know, it's hard work. It's not easy. It's not easy at all. So what about these people that say about, you know, these beings are trying to take us over. I had a girl who did an interview with Bases 1 with Miles Johnson about the Greys, and she said that they were trying to become us, and they wanted us to become them, and they, were busy sort of seeding us. I mean, I suppose there are people listening right now to the show and listening after when they hear it, who will be fearful that, they're trying to take us over. I mean, at the start of the show, when you were saying all those things, about all this happening and all the children changing, I thought, sounds like Village of the Damned. I start to get a bit overwhelmed.
Oh, look, this is actually extremely positive. And the reason it's positive is because, first of all, when people say, this whole thing, hybrid's going to take over the world. We're already hybrids. We've already taken over the world once we got genetically engineered all those, hundreds of thousands of years ago when it happened. So we're hybrids, guys, and we're part human and we're part non-human, which is our star ancestry, because we had these star beings come in and add their DNA to ours. So first of all, we've already taken over the world, and we've done it for many hundreds of years and thousands of years. So that's not what's going on here. What's going on here is we're waking up to more of who we are, and that's happening because these intelligences are really worried about this planet and what we're doing to it. And that's why they've accelerated the interaction, why you're seeing more UFOs and why more people are getting the message that they're interacting with them, because they want us to grow up and be mature and start realizing what we're doing. And it's at the moment, it's like a 3-year-old with a loaded gun who doesn't realize it can shoot people and kill them. And that's what we've got. We haven't got the maturity yet to actually realize the responsibility we have to each other and to the planet and to our cosmic cousins, if you like, or our cosmic family. So the whole point of these new kids coming in is so that they can assist us and teach us how to shift in awareness, so we realize who we are and what we are, and also our potential, so that we can join ultimately the galactic community. So that's why a lot of the children are becoming more telepathic, because they're showing us what we need to know. So when I wrote The New Human and what the children are learning off planet, they're learning this so that they can actually assist the rest of us to get to a point of that kind of awareness too. So they're helping us with our activations through the frequencies that we're experiencing. This is a positive thing. This is not something to be afraid of. It's actually part of what has been planned for humanity right from the very beginning, for us to be and create, and to be part of this new heritage that is part of what we were ultimately designed for. This isn't about them coming and taking over. We are them. Only, we haven't quite got the message yet.
Yeah, that's interesting. Is there any way do these children gather together where we can all go along and be with them, or do they go to the conferences?
No. A lot of the children are too young, although the teenagers certainly contact me. They do try and connect with each other a little bit, because they do feel very isolated and don't really know how to connect with one another. The parents write to me because they're seeing their kids are different and want to support them. A lot of the schooling is not actually very helpful to them because it's limited, and the children realize they're being taught a lot of stuff that isn't true. When you've got a kid that tells you that he can tell the difference between someone lying to him and somebody telling the truth. And I said to this 7-year-old that said, I can tell when someone's lying and when someone's telling the truth. I said, well, what does it feel like? He said, well, when they're lying, I go all cold. And when they're telling the truth, I feel warm. So he's already learned to discern between the rubbish that often we're fed over, the news and some of the information that we're taught right across the board. You and I know isn't accurate. a lot of the time it's propaganda or it's information that's edited so that it gets you to think a certain way. They can read through all of that, and they can discern all through of that, and they can know what is the truth. And they've come to help us to get that discernment as well, and for us to, activate our own discernment so that we can start really sorting this planet out. And that's their job, to help us, to help them create a future for us and for all of us. We're all part of it. And just because we're an older model doesn't mean that we can't upgrade along with them, because we're being upgraded too. So we'll all be in that same awareness. It doesn't mean that they're going to take over. It just means they're helping us with our own evolution.
What about these reptilians who people say have gained a lot of control here, and we're using their systems? A lot of systems in place are quite bad. They hurt people, the money system and, everything really. Is that reptilian or is that human that's done that's made it? Pardon?
All I can say is from my research, because that's what I go on, and not you get some people that say this is the mandate, this is how it is. Well, I never think anyone has the mandate on this because it's too complex. But what I will say is there's certainly been certain species, not all of them I might add, certain species that have tried to influence and certainly haven't wanted humans to evolve. Some say, certain reptilians are bad or all reptilians are bad. I've heard people have very loving experiences with some reptilians. The same with greys. When people, pull out these greys are X, Y, and Z. One lady told me that she knows of 165 species of grey. So you can't just start taking one out of them and saying they're all the same. There are different types and species of grey, tall, short, some more aware than others that have different programs and agendas. There are some reptilians that are very negative and have their own agenda, and there are some that are trying to evolve just like the rest of us. So, what I'm seeing and what I sense up to now anyway is that every species has those that wish to grow and want to evolve, and you'll always get those that don't, just like human beings. We're going to have some on this planet that don't want to evolve, that want to stay with the war and aggression and destroying things, and they're going to be those that want to evolve. And I think that's right across the board, depending what form you were in. Doesn't really matter. You're going to get the duality. So we can't say, they're the baddies and they're the goodies, because I actually think all species in different ways are trying to evolve. And remember, if you believe in reincarnation, and I've had plenty of evidence that that's real, then we've probably been a lot of these species that we're talking about before we came here.
Why do a lot of them seem like animals? Because animals are a bit dumb here, aren't they? And so it's like hard for us to believe. And then when we share it with people that doesn't, they're like, oh yeah, okay. It sounds like crazy,
Well, don't you think that some of these intelligences may put onto our planet, if you like, some animals that look similar to them to get us used to different forms, for example? Lots believe, and I do too, that the dolphins are actually, they've been recognized as being highly intelligent and are an extraterrestrial species, for example. So there's one example that you can think of that is we in our arrogance think we're superior to, but we may actually discover that they're a lot more aware than we are. One of the young children I spoke to, who was 10, told me he's aware of having an incarnation at the time of the dinosaurs as a human, but also remembers being an animal on this planet. I can't remember which animal it was now, but he remembers. So it's quite possible that our soul, our essence, has chosen to experience all forms of sentience, not just in human form, but in other forms as well. And I think that some of these beings that have what we would call an animal form may just have put these animals or these forms as animals as a way of exposing us to the variety of the cosmos, for all we know. So we've really got to get out this really arrogant thinking that we're top of the intelligence pyramid, and probably we're at the bottom, to be honest. And we've really got to start to expand our horizons and realize that anything is possible. What we can possibly imagine and beyond what we can imagine is probably more than possible, and even more than that. We've really got to expand on how we interpret things and how we understand what intelligence is and what consciousness is.
Yeah, because we think intelligence here is sort of stuffing our head with facts and, call it a degree or a PhD, but it's just learning what other people think, and it's just learning facts. It's not really intelligence, is it, in the certain way that one needs to have intelligence?
You're absolutely right. I think intuition is the intelligence. When you start opening up to that feeling, that sensing, that knowing that you have, where you shut down left brain and allow yourself to expand your consciousness, then you're really getting a handle on what consciousness is and what we are. The trouble is with the way that the Western mind operates is you've been educated, like we all have, right from the moment of birth, that unless you can touch it, feel it, see it, hear it, and smell it, it isn't real. When in fact, that's only one. We're looking at reality through one glass, one eyeball, basically, and thinking that that's what reality is. When we all know there's more to reality than our senses, our physical senses. That's just one part of reality. The other part is, and we all know it and feel it, you feel love, you don't know what it looks like, you don't know what color it is, it hasn't got a shape or a form, but you all know it's real. We know electricity is real, but we can't give it a form or a shape or whatever, but we know it because it powers our equipment and what have you. So there's many things that are we can't see, but we know are there, and the same as being clairvoyant and clairaudient, full well that you're communicating with spirits that are in a different frequency. That's all it is a different frequency. So not everyone can physically see them. Doesn't mean they're not there. It just means that we don't have the ability with our physical eyes necessarily, although some do, to actually see them. That's all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's weird, and it's weird how society, we sort of then trained to see ourselves as mad, and it's difficult. It is really difficult. It's a very dogmatic world, this world. I mean, especially as our leaders are a certain way, it's hard to break out of whatever it is that almost feels as if we've been trapped into something. Don't you think that has kept us in this low frequency? And
I absolutely agree, Christine. And I think that what I was going to say was the reason that we've been trapped is through the programming, the educational programming of the Western world. Indigenous tribes know full well there's a greater reality, and they don't have a problem with it. But we have been really programmed by our education, by families, and they've been programmed as well to only believe that reality is something our senses can tell us. Whereas in fact, the truth is that that's only half of what reality is. And the reason these new kids are upgrades, and I call them the new human, is because they can't be programmed quite so easily into that inaccurate and limited mandate. And the trouble is, too, we have a psychology, a modern psychology that isn't accurate, because anything that's out of the box, they see that as a dysfunction. There's something wrong with you. In fact, there's more right with you rather than what's wrong with you if you're experiencing that multidimensional side of yourself, if you are seeing, sensing, being aware of things from the greater spectrum of reality, you're actually showing an enhancement, not a dysfunction.
Yeah, it's difficult for kids these days, and difficult even for me to see that sometimes as, I mean, I charge money for it, which, I mean, I have to live. I've only started doing that recently, not very much as well, I have to add. But, it's hard to sort of get to grips with it. And then even if you do get to grips with it, there's the religion side of it, like, it says in the Bible that this is evil, it's necromancy. And, so we're very trapped in that way to not find joy in things like that. I mean, do you think that somebody did that?
Oh, look, I think we're heavily controlled, and we are, if you like, what word can I use? We're given a perspective that they wish us to have, which works for, and it's a kind of propaganda, if you like, to keep us in that limited box, because the more limited we are, the more we can be controlled. And I do think this is part of the agenda on the planet at the moment, to stop us expanding and realizing how much we're controlled. This sense of, we live in a free world or free society, as far as I'm concerned, is the biggest joke of the century, because there's nothing free about our world. There's nothing free about these, what we call so-called democracies and whatever. There's nothing free about any of it. It's all heavily controlled, and the education is actually part of that. That editing of our reality stops us from accessing the truth and who we are and what we can be, which is the potential for humans. Everything is geared to shut us down, including the encouragement of illness and the encouragement to take as many drugs as possible, the encouragement, with all, everything is geared to keep us in the box, from the food that we're eating, which is, a lot of it is polluted. We've got chemtrails, we've got fluoride in the water, we've got all these things that are actually shutting us down multidimensionally, and that's deliberate.
Yeah, so who is it? They are, I mean, they're dishing out antidepressants like it's the end of the, I mean, as crazy, because they're, those antidepressants, they're terrible things, to shut people down. Who do you think is doing that? I mean, is that alien, or is that humanity? Or who is doing that? Who would benefit by controlling us?
Well, that's the $1 million question. And it's really hard to know, but we do know there are those in the top of the pyramid on this planet, the ones with the wealth, and the ones that have the power to actually affect the rest of us, the rest of humanity. And I don't believe they have the well-being of most of us in mind, only themselves and those that they wish to survive. And I hate to say this, but that's certainly what my research is indicating. Who they are, I think, are behind the scenes, so it's very hard to identify them. Whether or not they're being manipulated themselves or controlled by other intelligences is possible, and some believe that to be the case. But the thing is, it's all supposition. Nobody knows for sure if it's just purely human greed that is at the top of the pyramid there, and people within that, or whether or not they're being influenced by other intelligences. Anything is possible, and it may be a combination of that. It's hard to know, but certainly they don't have our well-being in mind, and they certainly wish to control the rest of us. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, thinking back to Egypt, and I remember a past life in Egypt and how it was, and I think it was much closer to how we should have lived and how we should have evolved from that. And looking around the British Museum, you can just see how somebody came in and shut that down, that whole way of being, that whole communion with higher intelligences. And I was thinking to myself, who did that? And I came up with a theory, it just came into my head, that it was humans, it was humanity that that need to dominate, you know?
Well, I think that, you know, incarnating as a human, we've come to experience this matter, this meat body, as it were, and the material experience. And in it are all the challenges to grow either in a more loving way or to go the opposite and experience what that is, the lack of love. So for me, this is all part of the journey of dealing with these challenges. This is part of what we've undertaken as a soul, to come here and experience that. And I think the whole idea is to choose in a way that is not only more loving, but also to acknowledge that what we do to others, we do to ourselves, that it's all part of that journey, and we can make choices not to do that this lifetime. And then maybe that means that we need to be reminded in another life to do it then. I think it's all part of a journey that we undertake as a soul. It's part of the adventure and our choices are really what it's all about. This is, you know, when people say it's free will, the free will is to make that choice of a loving path or a non-loving path or a less loving path.
Yes, it is. It's lovely when you come across kindness here and loving individuals, and then it feels bad if you come across individuals that are shut down. You know, it is a strange place, and it's a hard place really as well. You know, it's hard here, isn't it?
Well, you know, to me, I think it's very easy to judge other people, but what we have to realize is that we're here on our journey, and it's about us changing, not expecting other people to change around us. So the more we shift our own intent into that higher frequency, the more chance we have of making a difference on this planet. So are we self-serving, or are we actually wanting to serve?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, they say that people, once they shift that awareness to that wanting to serve others, then they really start to find, you know, what they're here for, and, you know, rather than it being me, and yeah.
Well, I think the thing that, you know, when we look at what's going through the planet, many people get very disheartened. But what I'm saying is more and more people are waking up to being those that want to serve, that want to make a difference on the planet, that want to change things. And that's happening exponentially. So in that case, it's a very hopeful future for us, despite what we're seeing going on. There's a lot of things being uncovered now, the corruption that's going across the planet. People are really waking up. And that, I feel, is demonstrating a real shift in humanity and where we're going. And I believe that that's what is what we should focus on, is what is changing for the better rather than what's changing for the worst.
Yeah, you're right, exactly. Yeah, I focus on negative a lot. It doesn't get you anywhere. It just doesn't get you anywhere. You start off becoming a little bagel because you chase your tail round and round, and yeah, I mean, you really have to. We've only got 10 minutes left, Mary. I just want to say thank you for coming on. I'd want to end it with talking a little bit about these beings. I think it fascinates everybody, especially those who haven't had that sort of close-up experience. And the crop circles now, they're very beautiful, aren't they? I mean, I've never seen one. Are they just purely there for, I mean, how do they do them? Because they're intricate, aren't they, a lot of them?
Well, you live in, you know, the country that has the most of them, and I've been to those in Wiltshire, and I went to Avebury, where I went in one as well. I mean, they're fabulous to go in, and they certainly have a frequency. The real ones, the ones that are created by a higher intelligence, certainly have that frequency. And if you see some of the footage where you see the bright ball of light, and then 1 minute there's nothing, the next minute there's these intricate patterns. The understanding is that they create a certain frequency, and they're over aquifers, which means they're over water, and water can be programmed, and the whole senses that frequency goes into the water, and the water then is taken around the globe. So it's actually acting as a new programmed kind of water. If you think about it like that, then it's all about frequency. So they're bringing in a frequency along with all the other things that are going on this planet to help us shift our frequency and raise our frequency. So that's part of the purpose, I believe, apart from, that it is something that gets our attention, and that's really important.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'd love to go and see one. Where is there a real one? Avebury, is that a real?
If you go to Wiltshire, where the hub of it is, Alton Barnes, they've got a special headquarters there in Alton Barnes in Wiltshire, but they're all around that area in Wiltshire and the surrounding counties. There's one just recently appeared actually in France, an amazing one that only appeared a few days ago, which was Janet Ozabard, who's one of the crop circle researchers who lives in the Netherlands but goes to England regularly. She pointed out the one that's in France, and that only just appeared. So they are appearing in other countries too, but the most prolific actually happens to be in England. So you really do need to go and experience it. It is an amazing feeling.
Oh, I will. It's fascinating. And what about, I interviewed a while ago, and it was a while ago, a couple of years ago, the Joseph Farrell, Joseph, I can't think of his second name. He does the UFO. Is it Mufon? Have you heard of somebody? Gosh, why can't I think of his second name? So rude of me. Sorry?
Is it a Dr. Joseph Burke? Is that who you mean?
No, the guy who does is it Mufon or UFO? He's quite famous. I can't think of it. Yeah, okay. I can't think of his name.
Okay. That's okay.
Anyway, he was saying that a lot of people being abducted when they didn't want to be, that if they call out for Jesus, then they get put back in their bodies. I had a similar experience once, but that was with somebody, I think it's a black magician that Miles Johnson interviewed recently. So I had that experience with him. But what do you think of that? Do you think that sometimes it means some of the greys are actually demonic? I mean, what were the demons in the Bible, do you think? And are they still out there?
Look, there is no doubt there are lower forms of intelligence, interdimensionals often, that are parasitic, that feed off lower frequencies. There's no doubt that there are those. And, if someone is experiencing that, then they may very well shift the ability for that particular entity to affect them or attach themselves to them. But what of the beings, like some of the greys in an encounter, the children and adults, if they say it's not okay, many of them will be left alone because they won't take them unless there's an agreement. So that, it's very difficult because you can confuse the two. The lower frequencies, such as what we call demonic or lower entities, generally they're only accessing you if you're very, very fearful. They're inclined to be able to access somebody who's really, really scared. But again, if you're using a very high frequency like prayer, then it's very hard for them to access you.
Oh, I see. That's interesting. Yeah. Why are sometimes, like the mantids and the greys, why are they so ugly? Like the greys, they're not very good looking, are they? I mean, why, since they're higher and more intelligent than us, why aren't they a bit more beautiful? Why do they look like little? I mean, they're not attractive, really, are they?
Well, maybe, a grey to another grey is fine, and the mantis looking at another mantis hasn't got a problem with it. I can tell you that an 8-year-old boy explained to me that his family are the mantid, and that when he dies, he's going back to being a mantid, and that his ancestors are mantids, and he has got no problem with the fact that they don't look pretty to him. It's all in the eye of the beholder, to be quite honest, isn't it, Christine?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, even in our culture, you'll get people of different cultures where in one culture they'll be considered beautiful, but in another culture they won't be considered beautiful, for example. So it's just what is important is the frequency and the intention of that being. What are they conveying to you? Are they conveying love and unconditional regard, or are they conveying menace or whatever? That's really, you can have someone who looks very angelic and be a real ratbag.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So looks aren't necessarily a good indicator of a loving, gentle, or caring being. What is how you feel with them. And that's the important thing here, I think.
And do you think there was such a thing as fallen angels, that maybe the angels, I was thinking, are actually bird people, are avians, and that some have seen them and they've given them this name that's so overused that just doesn't mean anything now when you say it, angel, angel. I mean, what does it mean? You think of Doreen Virtue or something. Do you think there are such a thing as fallen beings, or we just, again, invented that? I mean, are there such a thing as angels that had an argument with God? It's always been hard for me to kind of believe that.
Well, I think you must go on what you resonate to. I mean, I see the angelic realm and judged as angels, which other people will see and say they are light beings. They're the same. I think what it's saying is that some of those from those higher frequencies or angelic realm, perhaps for whatever reason, chose a different path and are considered fallen because they didn't stay in that high state of frequency. I think, that to me is really the way I'd understand that they chose a different way of being, and that may not fit with that high frequency they were before. That's all.
Oh yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, that does ring true to me. Yeah, I know you're saying it. Yeah. Do you think that they were avian? They've got wings, haven't they? They strike me as maybe they're bird people. Birds.
Well, some, what we do, Christine, often when we see a being of whatever shape or form, we are sometimes being shown what they want us to see rather than their true form, because we don't always like something that looks very strange or weird. But when we do see the actual form, we just have to realize that on all these many planets from all over the cosmos, there are many shapes and forms of intelligence that they've chosen to manifest as. So we're just going to have to get used to difference and not necessarily judge it because it doesn't conform to what we consider beautiful, because they may look at us and think we're pretty ugly as well. So I think it's more about their intent and what kind of intelligence they are and whether or not they're loving or not loving.
Yeah. And of course we wither and die. I mean, we do bloom, and then of course we turn into bloody shriveled up, don't we, at the end? 90, 100, we're sort of we have to go through all that, and I suppose they think we're not too pretty at the very end.
Well, we may not be pretty to them even when we start out, because they're a different form. I think what we're being judged on is our behavior and how we treat one another. And I think we're likely to do the same, because in the end, it isn't about what form you take. It's really what's behind that form and what your soul is and what your essence is that matters at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. Well said. Well said, Mary. We're coming to the very end, and I think the music will play and it will cut me off. So I just want to say thank you. It's brilliant you coming on. It was so educational. I was making notes all the way through. I've half filled an exercise book.
You're most welcome. You're most welcome. And I'll send you the questionnaire and the other things what you mentioned. And thank you very much for being a great host.
Oh, thank you. That was brilliant. Where can people get hold of you, Mary? Where do you, where are you?
Well, all they've got to do is Google Mary Rodwell, and you'll see my YouTube, the things on YouTube presentations. I've got several websites, acern.com.au or maryrodwell.com.au or The Alien Lady. But basically, I've got Facebook as well. So there are many different ways you can contact me through the website or Facebook.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant. Excellent, excellent. And are you coming over to the UK soon? Is there any conferences coming up?
Not this year, but possibly next year. There's a possibility, but not this year.
Oh, excellent. And I forgot, I'm broadcasting across America. My cousin's over the water. And America, are you going over to America?
I've been to America twice this year, and so I won't be going over again. I did Nevada, I've done California, and I've done New York and Long Island and Philadelphia.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. You're busy. You're busy. And where are you now? You're back in Australia?
Yes, I'm back at home in central Queensland. So I've got a couple of months before I fly to Brazil at the end of August.
Wow. Yeah, you do a lot of hard work. Oh, well done. And your books, I can't wait to read them. I'm so lucky that you've sent me them. Thank you very much for that. And I'm sure people out there will be dying to read them.
Okay, lovely to speak with you.
And you take care. And thank you, everybody, for listening. And that's the show for this week. And thank you for listening. Thank you, Mary. God bless. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Take care.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message. Welcome to Revolution Radio, where you, the listeners, are in charge. Here at Revolution Radio, we present 48 broadcast hours of news and information each and every day. Revolution Radio never sleeps. Revolution Radio is worldwide and borderless information. Revolution Radio is also commercial-free. Revolution Radio is supported 100% by you, the listeners. And that's why we appeal to you to donate and support this station and its expenses. You can support us in many available options like archive subscriptions, our seed pack selections, or even my woodworking store. And we also even have Revolution Radio's swag at the Revolution Radio Zazzle store, which you can get t-shirts, coffee cups, even a baby onesie. Or you can just plain donate to the cause. We cannot continue without your support, and your support is what helps pay the bills. So please, if you wish us to continue, please stop by our station support page and drop a dime on us. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolutionary Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time.